Okay, everyone, it is Tuesday, and it's normally a day I have off from streaming. So I'm out in nature on a trail here in northern Colorado that's beautiful and literally touching grass. Imagine that. But the reason I'm filming this while I'm walking is because there's breaking news. So I'm filming it on my phone. Forgive me if the audio isn't great or whatever, but there's breaking news. Xbox is actually slashing pricing for Game Pass Ultimate and PC Game Pass by as much as like between 20 and 25% is what it looks like the final total will be. So Ultimate, which previously sat at $29.99, that's dropping to $22.99, and then PC Game Pass is dropping from like whatever, $16, $17. I would double check the numbers. They're on my phone I'm holding. But it's dropping down to like 13. So effectively, they're slashing prices between 20 and 25% across the board. And furthermore, the way they're achieving this is by removing Call of Duty titles from launching day one. And instead, they're going to be bringing Call of Duty titles roughly a year after. So the previous year's Call of Duty title will launch on Game Pass Ultimate and PC Game Pass, but the year, following their initial launch. Look at this tree. How beautiful is that? That thing's epic. Just spread out. Anyway, and I think, to be perfectly clear, this is the right move. I was saying back, I think months ago, we even brought it up, that Call of Duty on Game Pass, I don't think it was ever that big of a W. I think the people that really love Game Pass are the ones that want to try a bunch of different things. Maybe the term is buffet gamers. They like to play a little bit of this, a little bit of that, try this, put a few hours into that and just try everything. And those are the people that really, really benefit from it. So having one massive premium Call of Duty title added to the program every year just didn't really make sense. It wasn't that big of a W. Because chances are, if you're one of those players that really likes, trying a bunch of different stuff, you're probably not a big Call of Duty player. That's probably not your bread and butter. And so having it added day one doesn't really do much for you. And that's kind of where, at least I was like, why would I pay for Ultimate when one of the main reasons Ultimate is so expensive is Call of Duty, when I don't care about Call of Duty, but it was just how they bundled it. And that's how they did it. And it was an artifact of Phil Spencer's kind of philosophy. I think going back to 2021, one of the initial pitches that he made to Satya Nadella was that we're going to buy Activision Blizzard. We're going to have all of these massive games and IP and huge studios, and we're going to justify the expense of buying those studios by putting those games on Game Pass, making it the definitive way to have a gaming library. We basically replace buying games bespoke for each individual game that you're interested in. Replace that with a subscription model where we get recurrent revenue every single month. And that sounds initially like that makes sense, but just the problem is, at the end of the day, it doesn't work for every player. Like, not all gamers are the same. The people that like Call of Duty are mainly playing Call of Duty. There's not a whole lot of overlap, as far as I can tell, from the vast majority of Call of Duty players and the people who are playing like south of midnight. The people who are playing Doom Eternal and booting up Starfield, they're not the players who are hopping on every new Call of Duty and staying as engaged with it to the point where they would need a monthly subscription to keep their membership. And it also just kind of, on a very basic bare bones level, never really made a lot of sense to me. Because if you're really into Call of Duty and you play it constantly, every day you're putting an hour or two in, if you're really into it, why would you set yourself up for like a $30 a month membership where you're going to more than pay for the game after 3 months? Like, if you're playing Call of Duty for a full year, and I have some friends where that's their game, they grind it out. It's what they play every work night when they get back from work. That's how they decompress with their friends. That's their social game. And they play each new Call of Duty for the full year that it's the main game. And for those people, they're not signing up for Game Pass because they're going to pay way more for the game effectively by the end of it than if they just bought it up front for full price, you know? So the hardcore guys are probably still just going to buy the game. So it creates this weird system where you're trying to appeal to the hardcore gamers who are playing just that game and will justify $30 a month simply by the fact that they play a lot of it. But those same players are probably financially savvy enough to not do that and to just buy the game outright. I think the only way it would have worked is if they like cut selling traditional versions of the game cold turkey and forced all of those hardcore players to sign up for Game Pass. But because they didn't do that, which to be clear, I think that would have been an even bigger disaster and scandal. I don't think that would have been a good idea, but that would have been the only way, I think, to really inflate Game Pass numbers with Call of Duty specifically. Because instead now, what it's been for a year or two is just that people who are really, hardcore into it decide to just buy the game outright, and then everybody else who Game Pass appeals to, they can't justify signing up for it because it's so expensive. And one of the reasons it's so expensive is because of games like Call of Duty being included. So it just never made sense. The math never mathed, and now they're changing it. And I think that that's what has excited me most, is that we're actually seeing the new leadership take fairly bold action. Now, to be clear, the price cut does not bring Ultimate down to the point it was before the initial price hike. If you don't remember, previously Game Pass Ultimate was like $19.99, and then it received a 50% price hike, which took it all the way up to $30. This price cut brings it down a good chunk, but still not to where it was. And I'm sure they're going to point to other things, like they have heightened expenses, inflation, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of things they can say. But I think it's a step, at the very least, in the right direction, even if it's not a full remedy. They're walking in the right direction. They're headed back on the path. And it makes me optimistic, because up until now, Asha, since she took over, has been talking a lot, has been meeting with a lot of people, but there's not been a whole lot of indication or a lot of action, really, to demonstrate that she was going to actually walk the walk. She could talk the talk, but was she actually going to walk the walk? And it seems as though she actually is at least taking some steps in the right direction, which is really, frankly, encouraging, because I think the price cuts will help a lot. I think the fact that they're removing Call of Duty from it shows, or at least day one from it, shows at least a willingness to talk and engage with the consumer base, because at least in my circles, it was overwhelming in that people were not sold on Call of Duty being included day one. It was not a selling point for them. It was actually kind of a frustration that they were having to pay more for a game they didn't want, which never made any sense. And, it basically was taking us back to the days of cable where, you have to pay extra for all these channels you don't want, but that's how they would justify, those channels existing, was by everybody else subsidizing them effectively. And that works when you have a monopoly, but in the case of Game Pass and just gaming in general, there's competition. And I think what we've seen in the last few years is that whether you liked the philosophy of like what Xbox was doing and what they were trying to effectively do, it's pretty clear it was not working. It's pretty clear whether you loved the direction as a matter of principle or not, it wasn't working in business terms. It wasn't working. And that requires a change. And, when we talk about this stuff, sometimes people can conflate the 2 points, where some people might think that, when I say I don't think Game Pass is working, they got to change it. People think that, okay, so you want games to be more expensive. You don't like games being affordable for people. But that's not the point. The point is rather that I think you have to look at it both with what your personal preference would be and what is just practically the case. If I was the God King of gaming, I'd have Game Pass Ultimate be $10 and or $5 even, and I'd make every game super polished, launching day and date on every platform. Everything is cross-platform, and it would be great, But I'm not the God King of gaming, so what I want personally doesn't have that much effect. Rather, you have to kind of look at it from the business perspective, and what is pretty clear is that from a business perspective, Game Pass was not working. And what Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond were trying to do was just not working. And, I think they had, at least initially, I don't know if noble intentions is the right word, but I think they had good intentions. I think the goal really was at the start of the generation to make the most affordable gaming platform and to make games accessible for people. That's why the Series S existed. That's why Game Pass was priced the way it was. And I think that that was great. And it really opened up the door for a lot of gamers to experience AAA stuff that they wouldn't get to experience previously. I've been dead broke. I know what that's like. And I think it was really, really cool that Game Pass gave them an opportunity. People who didn't have a lot of money gave them an opportunity to play, you know, games that they would previously have to wait for like deep sales to experience. But even though I like that, it didn't make sense. And financially, it wasn't working. And at the end of the day, it's a business. And if the money is drying up and, you know, the executives can't figure out a way to keep things stable, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And something has to change. And that's effectively what happened, is that the money wasn't making sense. The numbers weren't adding up. And so they had to start doing layoffs and they had to start doing all of this stuff to try and right the ship. And I think it was a Band-Aid on a seriously deep wound. It didn't actually fix anything. And now with Asha, she's coming in and it's trying to actually identify what the wound is so they can try to actually fix it and do something about it, which is what needs to happen. I don't know how much leeway she's been given. There's been rumors suggesting that she's actually received clearance from Microsoft's board to lower the target margin rate. So effectively, they don't have to make as much money as quickly as they previously did under Phil Spencer, which gives them a little leeway to focus on building the brand back up instead of just chasing quick profitability, which I think is good if that's true. And I think their behavior so far has demonstrated that that's probably what happened. Like if they were demanding more and more margin, I don't think Asha would have been allowed to lower prices. I don't think that math would have mathed. You know, I think that she would have raised prices. So the fact that they're making cuts, they're adjusting things, I think is a good sign. And I think that it's hopefully indicative of them moving in the right direction. And at the very, very least, it shows that those executives within Xbox acknowledge that gaming is getting, or at least has gotten, too expensive for many, many people. And that's a big problem going into the next generation when you need to make a splash and you need people to spend a lot of money to kickstart the generation, to buy the hardware, to buy their initial library, to commit one direction platform-wise. And so I think that they're taking the right steps. At least, you know, they're headed in the right direction. Does this magically undo all of Phil Spencer's and Sarah Bond's mistakes? No. Like I said, it's not even cut down to the price it was before the last major price hike. So, you know, if we got down below 20, then I think, okay, we might actually be turning this around. This could, like, I would seriously consider signing up again for Ultimate at that point. But we're headed in the right direction, which I think is the point. And it's just refreshing to see. Again, I've said it before. It's nice to see an executive actually try, because I think we have not seen Xbox really try. There was just this energy within Microsoft and Xbox in general where they just kind of given up. Like, I don't know if you noticed, Phil Spencer used to go on tons of podcasts. He used to talk to fans all the time. He used to go to gaming events and he was super social. And in the last year and a half, 2 years of his tenure as the head of Xbox, he just kind of disappeared. And I think, like, largely he just checked out. I think he was just done. He was tired. He couldn't do what he wanted to do, and it wasn't working when he did get to do what he wanted to do, and he was just frustrated, and everybody was upset with him, and so he just checked out. And I think that that was the general attitude and energy within Xbox, is that they had just kind of thrown their hands up, and it was what it was. It was like, yeah, the brand is kind of dying, and people aren't signing up, and everything sucks, and we're going to lay people off, and it is what it is. But now, there's actually energy. I don't know if it's excitement or if it's just cautious optimism, but at the very least, people are interested in seeing what Xbox does next. And I'm one of those people. Because like I said, I think they're headed in the right direction. And if they keep this energy up and if they keep making adjustments and changes, and especially if PlayStation keeps making the same mistakes, focusing on live service stuff, wasting money on those pursuits and laying off high quality studios and doing all the stupid stuff they've been doing, I think you could actually see a pretty interesting start to the next generation. But time will tell. Time will tell. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me while I'm out on this lovely walk in the wood. It's a beautiful day here in Colorado. Thank you for making it possible for me to live here and for me to experience this and share this experience with all of you. Hopefully the noise wasn't too bad as I'm crunching on dead tree branches and leaves, but it's just gorgeous, isn't it? I encourage you, go get outside before Thursday, because I think there's going to be a lot to talk about on Thursday. If not already. Thank you for watching, guys. Much love. I'll see you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye. He took my thing.